we've kind of been hinting around it all through the presentation, but our announcement is that we're going to be shipping a Flash-based product by the end of the year. So that's our announcement for
Adobe Flash?
VFD 5. Adobe Flash-based. Actually, our first UI was Adobe Flash-based.
Well, you got over it.
Yeah, we got over it. So, and like we do everything, what we're trying to do is the right Flash solution for the mid-market. That's my reminder to say that. So, let's talk a little bit about the hardware, just to kind of give you a sense of it. It's it's a mixed solution. It's not all Flash. It's mostly spinning disk with some Flash. Kind of two solutions. I'm not sure which order these are going to ship in. I think probably the 10 drive system will come first. But this is 2 SSD and then 8 nearline SAS, and about 20% of the capacity will be SSD. And then we'll have a lower cost entry SSD solution to be 4 drives. And about 10% of the capacity will be SSD. So our requirements for Flash storage for the mid-market are, it's got to be fast. I mean, otherwise, what's the point of having Flash? It's got to be flexible. And it has to be simple. I mean, simple is, I'll just repeat that word like 100 times. And, that's the way we do things. So I think one of the key differentiators here is that all the VMs have access to all the SSDs. So we wide stripe, just like we do with the hard drives, with spinning disks, we wide stripe across all the SSDs. So you have access to all the SSD performance in every VM. And we do that with sub-virtual disk tiering, so actually storing data permanently on the SSDs, and with some caching.
What's the asterisk?
You'll see.
Oh, okay.
I did. So, like I said, the cache is actual additional storage capacity. Most of it is used for capacity. And then it's optional by virtual disk. So if you want a VM that doesn't use doesn't use Flash, you can just turn it off. It's granular control, and if you want to make a virtual disk that's all Flash, you can crank it to 11, and it will go. All of the data for that VSD will go onto the Flash.
But otherwise, the system just figures out what.
Yeah, and I'll explain how all that works in a second. One of the really cool things is if you're a current scale customer and you have a 3-node or a 5-node spinning disk system, you just add a couple SSD nodes to the top of that thing, and now every VM, every workload on your system is now Flash enabled and has access to that performance. So this is one of the things, mix and match. I mean, part of scalability for us is, scaling to your needs. You need to add storage heavy devices, you just add them to the mix. You need to add flash heavy devices, you just add them to the mix. So you need to add, CPU, add it to the mix. And so for new deployments, you can mix and match and build the right combination of nodes for the customer need. So it's very simple. Like I said, granular control, and it goes to 11. So, this is really, let's see if I can drop this down a little bit. So here we've got a VM. It's got 3 virtual devices. We'll just go in here and edit it, and you can see it's set to normal. If you want to turn it off, you just set it to 0. If you want to say all Flash, you turn it to 11.
I like that it goes to 11.
Yes. I mean, everybody wants it to go to 11, right? I mean, you're at 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 all across the board. Where can you go from there? These go to 11.
Competition? Yeah. I bet the competitor stuff doesn't go to 11.
Yeah. So
we have only one null.
It had to be his input.
Never.
So I think in the final I will actually change it. Instead of saying these go to 11, it will say all Flash, but it will still be 11. So this is kind of our traditional layout, right? You have one virtual disk. It has access to all the hard drives in the system, and there you go. So we've added an SSD tier. So how do we decide what goes on SSD and what goes on spinning disk? So we essentially split it. First thing is obviously the metadata. I mean, anytime you do a new allocation, anytime you do an allocate on write, you've got to update the metadata. That needs to be fast. Obviously, that goes on SSD. So the second part is the hot and the cold data. So obviously, we want the hot data on SSD and the cold data on spinning disk. And I'll go into how exactly that's done in a second. And then optionally, if you want to put the journal, that goes on SSD. That's the highest SSD requirement thing we have. Just to illustrate, if you turn it to 11, this is what happens. Everything ends up on SSD. If you turn it to 0, this is what happens. Everything ends up on spinning disk. And so you really have, it's simple, right? It's very easy to understand. Our customers don't have to, go take a class to figure out how to do this, but they do have good, solid control over their system and deciding what workloads need what resources. And you can save the SSD resources for the applications that really need it. One of the things that we see is, our customers generally have one, maybe two workloads that really, really need SSD. Now, you can't just put everything on spinning disk and let the rest of the stuff suck up all the IOPS there because, at some point you've got to get data off the SSD and onto the spinning disk. So, in general, we're just going to say everything has similar access to SSD for tiering, and if you have one or two applications that you really need, you can crank them up a little bit, and that's probably the best course of action.
And that's controlled per virtual disk.
Per virtual disk. So you can have one VM with one all-flash drive and one all-spinning disk drive right next to each other.
So like a use case for that then would be like a SQL server where I want my transaction logs mostly on flash,
right, and
my other volumes on disk.
So yeah, you might have your transaction on all flash, you might have your main database on the mixed hot and cold, and you might have some archival thing that you want all on spinning disk. And those can all be connected to the same VM. So the way we figure out what's hot and cold is we have what we call a heat map. We keep a rough I/O history for every single block in the VSD or in the virtual disk. So we have a history of its access pattern. And then based on that access pattern, we calculate a heat. And then we sort them hot to cold, and we put the hot ones on SSD and the cold ones on spinning disk.
What makes it rough?
Well, so, a terabyte VSD is going to have 1 million blocks.
Yep.
So we can't keep a full time-stamped history of everything. It would be too big. So we simplify that down.
Yeah.
I want to tell you more about it, but that one's in patent right now, so I can't talk about it. It's really cool, but we get a lot of information condensed into a very small bit of information that we can keep in memory to use to do this stuff. So this thing's actively running jet stress. There's kind of two views of the heat map here. The top one's compressed just because there's not room for a line for every block. But you can see down here, every pixel represents one block in the on the virtual device. And what we're doing is keeping a heat index for everything on here. And so you can see towards the end of the disk here, we've got a bunch of really hot blocks. So those are obviously going to end up on SSD. And so all those accesses, all those repeated accesses on there is going to be as fast as possible. But you can see that most of the blocks here are really pretty cold. And so putting it on a spinning disk is going to have very, very little impact on the performance. So that's kind of the cool new technology that we've got to help tier the SSD.
Is this heat map going to be part of the customer-facing UI, or is it really more for your?
I think it will be because it's
cool.
Everybody loves pretty blinking lights, and that's a pretty cool picture, I think.
It was Satyam the other day. They watched the blinking lights, German.
Yeah.
So we're actually done early. So this is, I was going to end on pretty pictures. So you guys have questions or comments?
So do you guys sell through resellers or direct?
We're 100% channel. So.
Okay.
Is that worldwide or limited market?
We're Mostly worldwide. Yeah, I mean we have clusters everywhere.
14 countries.
Yeah.
How many continents, though?
Don't say more than 7.
Thousands of continents.
I don't think we've got one in Antarctica.
Probably 4. Probably 4.
Well, we just installed one in Australia, right? So
Yeah.
And it's one support. Like it's 24/7.
24/7.
The only
yeah,
option, right?
Yeah, and we don't have like 2 levels of support. It's basically you get the great support, and that's it.
Okay.
There's-
How does ongoing support work? Is that a subscription sort of thing?
Right. So the prices include first year of support.
Okay.
And then there's a yearly cost after that.
Okay.
Which I think is like 17% of the initial price or something.
Yeah,
like that. I
something
mean, it's
like that.
reasonable. I mean, no, I mean
Turns
it's
out that's usually my biggest design constraint. You know?
right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So and for us it's
That was the number one thing that always pissed us off, being IT guys, right?
Well, and I think for us, it's, the simplicity thing drives the entire company, right? It's not just the product simple, it's buying it as simple, the way we go about selling it is simple. We want the customer experience to be easy, start to finish. So
The channel thing disrupts that a little bit.
it does, it does.
Yeah.
But these are the guys that, make the recommendations to a lot of our customers. A lot of our customers don't go on the internet and do hours of research to pick it. They go, hey, Bob, what should I buy?
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, it's less simple. From your customer's point of view, it's probably more simple.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's the thing is, in a lot of ways, it's our job to take on the complexity, right, to shield the customer from it, right? That happens with the technology, it happens in support, happens with the sales process.
So, question on Twitter from Australia. Hi, Justin.
Hey, Justin, how's it going?
Justin,
What's
up, Justin?
Yeah, it's Justin.
He says it's 11:30 p.m.
He's like,
there.
oh crap. It's like,
Well, at least
like
he
he's
was,
got a scale shot
At least it's
glass.
not 1 in the morning for him. So,
So, what's the story around backup recovery and carrying on disaster recovery for customers?
so DR, we highly recommend that you buy 2 clusters and you replicate to the other cluster. When you have a disaster or even a temporary disaster, spinning up the VMs on the DR site is 1 click. 1 click per VM, but you fire it up, start it up, and you're up and running in minutes.
How does fail? Not to
Okay,
derail
yeah.
that.
So the
failback works.
So the failback is awesome.
Okay.
So the
I want to get back to that.
Failback's awesome.
As long as there are no following questions.
no, I'll explain.
Failback is awesome.
The failback is awesome. So what happens is we know basically what snapshot that clone came from.
Okay.
And so when it's time to fail back, what happens is you take a new snapshot and you send the diffs back and we reconstruct all the differences that happened over there. So minimize the changes on the way back. And then eventually when you're like happy that it's caught up, you just shut that one down, clone the new one and fire it back up. So basically re-replicate back. It's the same process both directions.
Same process, and then you've got a replication seed on the other end.
And when you think about that, it's like, because 9 times out of 10, when does that DR scenario hit? It's like everybody wants to protect against the the fire, the tornado, all the bad things that could possibly happen. Reality is, Billy Bob probably got crazy with the backhoe out in front of the building.
Through the power.
Yeah. So he cuts that cable, right? 12 hours later, they are going to basically replace that cable. And you are going to be back up. Do you want to replicate 40 terabytes of data, or do you want to replicate 12 hours of data change? Over that, and that's effectively the way the system is built.
I hate to talk about far futures, but there's a super cool feature coming around that where we can we'll basically live migrate between the clusters for the failback. So you won't even have to take the VM down on the way back.
Cool.
So
Did you get your backup?
So, to Justin's actual question, because the DR was my add-on. Backup recovery.
With hijacking.
So backup recovery is, right now if you want, the backup stuff, the snapshots are, you can pull those up and go get a file and all that kind of stuff. So they work for that, but it's not great. The real solution is, an in-guest agent. And
with a separate backup system.
With a separate backup system.
Are you thinking of?
I mean, that's definitely on our roadmap, is to get that in there. And we actually talked to the Rubrik guys about trying to integrate their stuff. pretty cool. And and we don't.
This is one of the great things about this event, right?
Yeah.
Is the other vendors you meet. And
obviously they have a
there are some
great
phenomenal
product,
folks.
and I don't want to go crack open Exchange
Yeah.
database software. So
Yeah,
That's not us,
You're not in that
right?
business.
That's not our company.
so is there any way, aside from the export functionality, is there any way to, are there any products right now that I can attach to your guys' stuff to do a VM image level backup in an automated fashion? I'm not a big open stack.
yeah, so there's not a lot of options. We I think it's Acronis has something that's like really early stage. We're really trying to figure it out because I know. We're really trying to figure it out because it's a big deal. It's a big deal for our customers.
Yeah, that would be
we walk
really cool.
into
Well, and it's a general problem with KVM.
Yeah.
right.
You know,
It is,
like-
and we have we displace VMware every day. That's
what we
90% of our customers have VMware, and we go in and they throw that away and go off our stuff. And if it's us and VMware, it's a no-brainer. As soon as they go, "What about Veeam?" We're like, "Well,
Yeah.
if you love Veeam,
Yeah.
that becomes a problem." Now, we've got solutions and we can work around it, but it's definitely a stumbling block for us. There's definitely ways to make it work. We obviously, given the way our stuff works, right, it should be simple and easy and just work, right? And that solution for backup is not
Instead of
there.
spending all the time on maintaining the virtualization environment, I'm going to spend a whole bunch of my time on a backup solution.
Right.
Instead, like whereas, under VMware, the backup solution was fairly straightforward because there's an ecosystem around
Right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
But yeah, I think we have some customers that just do an on-site storage only cluster and do the backups to that and basically replicate to that as a local backup. So there's lots of options, none of which are like a slam dunk.
The DR scenario, you boot the VM in the other site, IP addresses?
So we don't do anything with that right now. So generally what we do is you set up 2 network cards, one that works in each place, and then when you boot it just fires up and goes. So
2 network cards in the VM?
yeah.
Oh. All right.
Works. It's a little clunky, but it works.
Now, is there any plan to do runbook automation or build that in to, create a failover plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely on the roadmap. Yeah.
Do you have a OS agent of some kind?
We use we don't. We don't right now. We will soon.
You will.
It's part of the KVM package. They have an agent that
A lot of the VirtIO stuff.
the VirtIO stuff, the drivers, but those are just drivers. But the agent is coming.
To fart around within the guest.
Yeah, great. And that's how
Which,
that's how you go about fixing the
VSS
Well, there's lots of ways to
and
fix the network problem.
all-
right?
all that
you
fun stuff that
some
goes along
fun
with that,
SDN
right.
stuff, or
Yep.
make changes in the guest, or whatever you need to do.
Can you import VMs from other environment, or how
Yeah.
do you handle actually the brownfield deployment?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to go about that. Most customers don't want to take their VMs down, so we recommend that you use double take move for that, because you can do that live and do a live migrate essentially from VMware onto Scale, or from physical onto Scale. You can also, we can take the VMDK and do some magic and import it through the system too, but then you're down while that's happening. So there's several options there. I think Acronis has a solution that works in certain cases. So, but part of getting a Scale cluster and getting that thing up and running, we do provide services to do the migration, and it's it's work, but it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, we don't just put the gear in and leave you hanging, right? It's one of the things that we do is, we'll install the gear and then go kind of above and beyond as far as, just getting everything up and running. It's not like does it power on? We go a step beyond that, and we'll help with network configurations and any kind of advanced like DR stuff that you want to put in. I mean, that's what we do, and that's why we get high. That's why we get really high marks for our tech support.